You're crying about TikTok comments approving crime, but yet you do it to yourself. I know what that means. I didn't say you should do crime and companies do crime. All I'm saying is that tech companies do crime, but crimes aren't really enforced a lot of times. It's a lot of times it's kind of like, it depends. Crime. Chat delayed in the VOD yet. The VOD is a little bit delayed. This is not the judge. I think this is somebody who does some other shit. This is the judge's spot. This is who does this person do? It's a clerk or some shit. She doesn't type. That's not Michelle. That is not Michelle. Is she? The stenographer is not. I don't think that's her. I think it'd be somebody else. That's like. Est-ce que t'as de l'eau, Johan?
Ouais, ben.
Oh, c'est good. Oh, damn, that's really good. Holy shit.
J'ai du café, on va juste apporter dessus qui est déjà comme tu veux.
That's like. Dude. Est-ce que tu sais aussi?
Ouais, j'en ai, il faut que j'ouvre la canne, j'ai pas eu le temps.
Oh, merci Nick. Nick, det är bussen. Holy. Bussen. Oh my. Jesus. That's called ham. Nobody calls this bacon. Nobody calls this bacon.
Good morning.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Do we have any preliminary matters?
We have some exhibits to hand
Oh,
out.
that would be fantastic. That'll make Jamie's day.
Well, they're getting all friendly now.
All right, we ready for the jury then? Okay.
Okay. So today apparently they're calling Johnny to the stand again, but it's the defendant who are calling him on the stand. Eyewitness. That's what I heard. It's a leak from Lee Cox. I don't understand. I'm not on trial. I didn't do no crime. Unless.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Have a seat. All right, your next witness.
Your Honor, Amber calls Dr. Richard Moore.
All right, Dr. Moore.
Who the fuck? The fuck is Richard?
Do solemnly swear or affirm to testify truthfully in this case in the penalty of law?
What's up, bro?
All right, yes, sir.
Good morning, Dr. Moore.
Good morning.
Can you please tell the jury your full name?
Richard Salter Moore, Jr.,
Where do you work?
Emerge Ortho in Wilmington, North Carolina.
And what is your position there?
I'm a shareholder physician, orthopedic surgeon, practicing hand, upper extremity, microvascular surgery.
Oh, wow.
For how many years have you been an orthopedic surgeon?
So I completed my fellowship in 1997, so for 25 years.
And I believe that you mentioned this, but tell the jury what area of orthopedic surgery in which you specialize.
So I'm a orthopedic surgeon.
Hands,
Finished
feet.
medical school, went to a 5-year orthopedic surgery residency. At the completion of my residency, I wanted to specialize in hand surgery. So I did an additional year of training specifically in hand and upper extremity surgery before starting practice in my first year as an attending.
Where are you currently licensed?
North Carolina.
For how long have you been licensed?
Since 1991 or 6.
These guys are no joker.
I think it was 1996 when I was licensed in North Carolina.
Beginning with your undergraduate studies, Dr. Moore, could you please tell the jury a bit about your educational background? I know you mentioned a little bit of it just now.
So
Oh,
I
6 now.
attended University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, graduated in 1987 with a BS in biology. I went on to medical school at UNC and graduated in 1991. I then went to the hospital at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, did a 5-year orthopedic surgery residency there. And in 1996, I went to Duke University Medical Center and did a year fellowship in hand, upper extremity, and microvascular surgery. And on completion of my fellowship, I was invited to join the faculty, and my role was hand and trauma, and so I went to Los Angeles for about 6 months for a preceptorship in pelvic trauma, and then went back to Duke and practiced as the director of the orthopedic trauma service and a member of the hand, upper extremity, and microvascular reconstruction team until 2000 when I relocated to North Carolina, to Wilmington.
And you maintained an active clinical practice since 2000?
Yes.
And before that when you were at Duke, correct?
Yes.
Just very briefly, can
Real
you tell the
syrup,
jury what
made
is a
at home.
residency?
Residency is largely an apprenticeship. So when you finish medical school, you have a MD medical degree, but you really can't practice medicine, and you take a tract of internal medicine or pediatrics or OBGYN or orthopedics, and then it's a graduated training program anywhere from 3 to 5 or 6 years.
And what's a fellowship?
And a fellowship is a year beyond training. When I completed my residency, had I chose to, I could have practiced as a general orthopedic surgeon. But I wanted to subspecialize, and therefore that required an additional year of training.
And I believe you mentioned this, but your subspecialization was in the hand, is that right?
That's correct.
Why did you choose to specialize in the hand?
Patient population, the types of problems we treat,
Sup?
the anatomy is really the biggest reason I chose
No,
it.
I don't want to. I think.
I mean, for lack of a better term, it's really pretty beautiful anatomy.
And let's talk about that anatomy. There's bones in the hand, right?
Correct.
And then there's tissue and blood vessels, right?
Objection leading.
Overruled.
I'm sorry, you can go ahead and answer that.
Yep, that's correct.
And what is the surgery called where you operate on tissues and blood vessels in the hand?
Well, that would be hand surgery. I mean, there are different components of it. There's trauma where we do repairs of tendons or blood vessels. There's a microvascular element where we repair injured nerves. In my practice at Duke, I was on the replant team, and so we would do replantations when digits were cut off. We would try to reattach the bones and tendons and nerves and vessels to reattach the digits, and hopefully I'm survive.
And have you performed surgeries of that nature?
Yes.
When you perform surgeries of that nature, what assessment do you make of the cause of those injuries?
So cause is a big element. It's an important element to appreciate because it can impact management in a lot of those settings. You know, there's a difference between a laceration caused by a razor blade and a laceration caused by, say, a serrated knife. There's a larger zone of injury. So what we anticipate having to manage is based on how the injury was created. There's also other elements, contamination, you know, farmyard injuries.
This is
are totally
relevant because
different
of Johnny's
than
finger that was cut off.
Kitchen injuries with raw chicken are totally different than some other settings, and so it does play a large role in management.
After your fellowship at Duke University, I believe you mentioned you had another role at Duke for a few years. Is that right? Can you tell the jury about that?
So I did my fellowship and I joined the faculty as an assistant professor, and so I was in charge of teaching residents and fellows. I was the director of the orthopedic trauma service, and I was on the hand call team in addition.
Have you had academic appointments at any universities other than Duke?
I have a adjunct assistant professor appointment at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, which has affiliated training programs in the center where I practice now.
Have you held any leadership positions in your field?
I've been an officer and the past president of the North Carolina Society of Surgeons of the Hand, the Duke Hand Club or Society now. I'm a member of the American Society of Surgery of the Hand, of the Orthopedic Trauma Association, of the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgery, and of the American Orthopedic Association, the AOA.
Are the majority of your surgeries hand surgeries?
Yes.
How many hand surgeries, ballpark, would you say you've performed in your career?
Over 25 years, thousands.
If you're in trouble, he can give you a hand.
Have you seen finger injuries similar?
Spochybňuj, čo chceš, len nie túto chuť. Ochutnaj novinku Mighty s extraktom z konope.
Similar to the one sustained by Mr. Depp in Australia?
Yes.
And have you evaluated injuries like that?
Yes.
Have you treated injuries like that?
Yes.
Have you operated on fingers that looked like that?
Yes.
How many times? Ballpark.
Hundreds, if not more.
What does it mean to be board certified in your field?
So board certification is a process that you pursue after you complete training. So at the time, there have been some changes, but at the time that I finished my training, after residency, we took a written examination, and if you passed the written examination, you had to practice for 2 years. At the end of that 2 years, you submitted a list of cases over 6 months to the board, and they picked 12 cases, and then you gathered up 10 and went to Chicago and had an oral examination based on those cases. And if you passed the oral examination, then you were board certified.
And your board certification is in what?
Orthopedic surgery.
What is a certificate of added qualification?
So in the event that you elect to do a fellowship and subspecialize, hand surgery is one of the specialties that you can apply for a certificate of added qualification. And so once I was board certified, I practiced for an additional year or two, had to resubmit a list of cases and take a written examination to become certified in hand surgery.
Do you teach other surgeons how to do hand surgery?
Occasionally, on occasion, yes.
When was the last time you did so?
Day before yesterday.
Tell the jury about that.
I was, over the weekend, I went to Miami to serve as faculty for a course, a bioskills course we call it, on shoulder and wrist surgery. And surgeons come in and we have case presentations and panels, and then they had a cadaver lab, and we were able to allow them to perform the surgery in cadavers to become familiar with the equipment.
Have you published in your field?
I have.
In peer-reviewed literature?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, we'd like to offer Dr. Moore as an expert in the field of orthopedic surgery and specifically hand surgery and injuries to the hand.
All right, any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
So moved. Yes, sir.
Dr. Moore, now we get to talk about this case. At our request, what have you reviewed, just general categories of information have you reviewed at our request in this case?
So a tremendous amount of material. I reviewed the video deposition and trial testimony of Mr. Depp regarding the injury, the medical records from Australia, the photographs of the injury from Australia and Los Angeles, texts and emails, the deposition of Dr. Kipper, and I'm sure there's more.
And when you reviewed the deposition of Mr. Depp, was that just in paper form?
It was a video deposition.
And so what did you review of that deposition?
The section where he describes the injury.
And did you see a video of him describing it?
I did.
And you watched the testimony from this trial of him describing it?
Yes.
And you mentioned that you reviewed some texts as well. What are those?
There were communications amongst Mr. Depp and his physician and others.
And what did you specifically review in those texts relating to the finger injury?
Well, with relation to the finger, there was a text where he had stated he cut his finger off.
Now, Dr. Moore, I'm going to ask you some questions about this case regarding the opinions that you formed relating to Mr. Depp's finger injury. When I ask you those questions, do you agree to answer my questions to a reasonable degree of medical probability?
Yes.
And do you agree to advise the jury and the court if you are not answering any of them to a reasonable degree of medical probability?
I can already tell.
Yes.
Dr. Moore, based on your analysis, did Mr. Depp's finger injury happen as a result of a vodka bottle being thrown at him?
Objection leading.
Overruled.
I'm sorry.
No.
And what is the basis for that opinion?
Well, the medical data is inconclusive. It's not consistent with what we see in the described injury pattern or in the clinical photographs. And there are several elements. There's the description was of the hand being flat on a bar and the bottle crushing the finger from the top. But looking at the images, there's really no significant injury to the dorsum of the finger, and to create the type of injury with that type of a crush injury, we would anticipate both injury to the fingernail and other parts of the finger.
Can I stop you there and just break down a few things? You said the hand resting flat on the bar. Can you show the jury what direction the hand was resting based on the documents you've reviewed?
I think that the demonstration was with the hand flat, like this, across and maybe even curled over the edge of the bar like this.
Which side was facing upward? Which side of the hand?
The back of the hand, or we call it the dorsal surface of the hand, was up.
Doctor, if you could get closer to the microphone.
He does not agree with this at all.
Thank you, Your Honor. So you referred to the back of the hand as the dorsal side of the hand, is that right?
That's correct.
Sort of like the dorsal fin on a shark?
Correct.
Fair. And what is the other side of the hand called?
The palmar surface.
Palmar? Okay. So what direction was Mr. Depp's hand resting on the bar?
So the dorsal side was up, which with the descripted mechanism of injury or the injury, the bottle would have struck the top of the finger at the fingernail.
Okay. And you also mentioned a term that I'd like you to explain to the jury, crush injury, please.
So with review of the images and the x-rays, I mean, this was a crush injury. That would generate the findings clinically on x-ray that we saw. The fracture is a we call it comminuted, and the tip of the finger is in multiple splinters, so there are multiple fragments, and typically you see that with a crush type injury.
So a comminuted fracture is one where there's multiple fragments of bone?
That's correct.
And what was the basis, other than what you've read and heard, but from the pictures, what was the basis of your opinion that the hand was resting palmar side down?
Well, that was the way the injury was described and demonstrated in the videos. And so in that position, were the bottle to strike the finger the way it was described, it would have struck on the nail, and the nail was really not injured, and so that's not consistent with that pattern of injury.
Michelle, could I get you to pull up exhibit DX369, page 26? Your Honor, this is admitted. Ask for permission to publish.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Moore, is this one of the images that you reviewed?
Yes.
Tell us
Okay,
in
we're allowed to
relation
show it,
to
right?
your expert opinion on the cause of Mr. Depp's injury. Tell us what you see in this picture, please.
So this is it looks like an avulsion type injury where tissue's actually pulled or pinched away. I think what's important in this picture is that the tissue loss is on the palmar aspect from underneath the finger rather than all transversely in the finger, which you would anticipate if the bottle struck the finger. You would expect more of this level of injury rather than isolated to the palmar aspect.
And what do you notice about the condition of the fingernail in this picture?
So from this image, the fingernail appears to be intact. You can't necessarily see the entire nail, but there are other images that have a better profile of that. And the nail's not elevated. There's no subungual hematoma beneath it, or there's no bruise underneath it. Anyone that's ever stuck their finger in a drawer or caught it in a car door or hit it with a hammer knows that almost immediately there's typically bleeding underneath the nail, which creates this hematoma.
So, not being a doctor, I'm going to try to
Fuck, it's so spongy.
summarize what you just said. Are you saying that in an injury like this, if something had come from the top, that there would be an immediate impact to the fingernail bed?
That's correct.
Michelle, could you please pull up Plaintiff's Exhibit 144? Your Honor, this has been admitted as well.
No, don't pull up the 174.
Thank you.
Dr. Moore, I believe you mentioned just a few minutes ago that there were other pictures that showed more of the nail. Is this one of those pictures?
Yes.
And explain to the jury, again, and I'm sorry for the graphic nature of this photo, but it's important that the jury understands the basis for your opinion that a bottle couldn't have caused this coming in from above.
Yeah, so it's again, the mechanism described would have almost certainly led to severe nail injury. You know, I see no subungual hematoma. Again, it's a palmar tissue loss, and the loss is from distal to proximal, which is from the tip back far below the nail. And so for it to create that tissue loss down there would almost certainly have to be injury dorsally with that described mechanism.
So what you're saying is that something coming from the top could not
Okay,
have
what
left
he's saying
the
actually
nail
makes
intact
sense.
and yet caused injury from the tip of the finger underneath the nail.
Objection leading.
Okay, what he's saying actually makes sense.
You can answer.
So I believe that with the mechanism described, that if the bottle struck
As
the
an
nail,
idiot.
there would have certainly been an injury to the nail bed, and in order for the soft tissue injury to be created by that mechanism, there would have almost certainly been tissue loss on the top of the finger as well.
Does Mr. Depp's description of what happened line up with the undisputed photographic evidence that you've reviewed?
No.
Now, we mentioned the term crush injury a few minutes ago. I'd like to show you DX360, please.
Ah! What the
And,
fuck?
Your Honor, this is, we won't publish this at this time. Is this a document that you reviewed in connection with your expert opinion in this case?
Yes.
And Michelle, if you can please go to pages I believe they're 5 and 6. Your Honor, I'd ask for permission to publish these as a demonstrative to the jury.
Just page 5 and 6.
Sorry.
My last coffee.
09 and 10.
Page
2
09
pages.
and 10. Could you go to 10 also so plaintiff can see it? Okay, any objection to 09?
No objection, Your Honor.
Okay, 09, 010 can be published.
Dr. Moore, what are these pictures of?
So these are x-rays of the injured digit.
And what do you observe in these x-rays? Explain to the jury what you see.
So these are two views. So one in the plane looking through the finger in this direction, one in the plane looking through the finger sideways. And you can see that the tuft or the tip of the finger, the last bone in the finger called the distal phalanx, is shattered. You can see there's multiple little spicules of bone. And there's also a transverse fracture at that level, which runs through the bone. So this is what we would describe as a comminuted fracture, and it's commonly associated with crush injury.
In your decades of practice, Dr. Moore, have you ever seen a comminuted fracture like this result from an object thrown in the way that Mr. Depp described?
Well, not with the constellation of findings shown on the x-rays. I mean, I think that could create a fracture, but in this setting, it wouldn't create a fracture with without the associated other injuries that we would anticipate.
And in your decades of practice, when you see a comminuted fracture like this, what are some things that have typically caused it?
So crush mechanisms could be slammed in a drawer, caught between two logs in the fireplace, car door, sliding glass door. Those are all any mechanism that squeezes the finger between two hard opposing surfaces could create this type of injury.
In the statements of Mr. Depp that you reviewed, how did he describe what happened to the alleged bottle when it hit the bar?
I believe he said it exploded, shattered.
Why would he lie, though?
A bottle had exploded near his finger in the way that he alleges. What would you expect to see in the documents that you have reviewed?
Well,
why would Johnny lie
that
to somebody who's going to fix his finger?
Did a good job of documenting the presentation, the appearance of the wound. They did not document the presence of any glass shards, and there were no other associated injuries elsewhere on the hand.
Okay. And I just want to step back for 1 minute. Michelle, can you pull up the next page of the x-ray here?
F for me, F.
Thank you. And Dr. Moore, just before we move on from x-rays, can you, I know that this, when it's blown up like this, it's a little bit blurry, but can you point out or describe to the jury where the multiple bone fragments are in the finger?
So they're in the very tip. If you see the joint, and then there's what we call the transverse fracture, which is across the middle of the bone in the same plane as the joint, and then the multiple fragments are in the tuft. And with a Xerox copy, the quality is not as detailed as a true X-ray.
You can take that down, please, Michelle. Thank you. So back to the glass. In the records that you reviewed, Dr. Moore, did you see any adjacent injuries? In other words, injuries to any other part of Mr. Depp's hand other than the tip of his middle finger?
No.
What does that prove?
Is that observation consistent with the explosion of glass type phenomenon that Mr. Depp alleges?
Well, I think in the setting of a glass explosion like that, where there's multiple fragments and the tip of the finger's cut off, you would anticipate that there would be other lacerations.
Did you review the documentation in the medical records from the hospital in Australia?
Wait,
Yes.
really?
Did any of those providers report retrieving glass from the wound?
No.
What about any glass near the site of the injury?
No.
What about any glass in other parts of the hand?
No.
What about any glass in any of the other fingers?
No.
Is there any reference at all, Dr. Moore, that you've seen to any glass in the records that you've reviewed?
No.
And Dr. Moore, in your decades of practice, have you ever seen an injury associated with a glass explosion that was focused on the end of a single finger in the way Mr. Depp describes?
Well, not consistent with the clinical images and the findings in this case, no.
Have you ever seen an injury associated with an alleged glass explosion where no other glass was found on any part of the patient's body or clothing or anything?
No.
And because there's been talk of a glass explosion, Dr. Moore, there's seems to have been a suggestion that somehow glass may have sliced off the end of Mr. Depp's finger. Is that what's going on here?
No, this wound doesn't really appear to be a sharp glass laceration.
You referred earlier to an avulsion, which is a term I had never heard before. Your opinion in this case. Explain to the jury what that is, please.
So often with crush injuries and we'll see tissue loss that we call an avulsion, or where the tissue's actually pinched or pulled away rather than sliced or cut. It's not uncommon with crush injuries to see that.
Wait, but that doesn't make sense.
In your decades of practice, Dr. Moore, have you ever seen an avulsion injury with a partial amputation that results from
Okay, there you go. Sorry.
an object thrown from the top of the finger in the way that Mr. Depp describes?
No. Again, I think that the description differs from the clinical appearance on the images.
So what would cause a crush and a
Michelle, can you
slice at the
please
same
pull up
time?
Exhibit 369 at page 12.
If the
This
bone
has
is
been admitted, Your Honor.
crushed and the thing's sliced off, what caused that then? Even a knife would be a
Dr.
slice.
Moore, you said you've treated thousands of hand injuries over the course of your career, correct?
Correct.
What is that on Mr. Depp's hand?
Hitting a metal wall would do that.
So we describe that as a
Objection,
as-
calls for speculation.
The picture just changed.
Sorry, page 12, please.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. What is that on Mr. Depp's hand?
So that's a plaster
I'm sorry.
splint.
Overruled the objection.
Okay, sorry, thank you. I'm sorry, please tell the jury what that is on Mr. Depp's hand.
So that's a plaster splint. A half a cast is how I sometimes describe it to patients, and it provides stability for comfort and to protect fractures in the course of treatment.
Is that plaster splint hard or soft?
What's plaster Paris? It hardens like a cast does.
Dr. Moore, does Mr. Depp's description of how his finger became injured line up with the facts that you've seen?
No.
I have no further questions.
All right,
Thank you, Dr. Moore.
Cross-examination.
We'll see how they do with Cross. I think Cross will be really good here. I think they opened up a good opportunity for Cross to do
Good
pretty
morning,
good.
Dr. Moore.
Good morning.
You said you reviewed Mr. Depp's video deposition, is that correct?
That's correct.
And you said you reviewed Mr. Depp's testimony at this trial, correct?
That's correct.
And was that also a video of his testimony?
Yes.
And you testified that Mr. Depp demonstrated that his hand was flat on a surface, is that correct?
That's correct.
That's not entirely accurate, is it, though?
Here she goes.
His description was relatively consistent in both, including turning and resting the hand on the edge.
Isn't it true, Dr. Moore, that when Mr. Depp did the demonstration in his deposition, he showed that his fingers were hanging over the bar?
Well, even hanging over the bar, it still leaves the dorsum of the hand or the nail vulnerable.
That's
to
not my question, Dr. Moore. My question is, isn't it true that Mr. Depp said his fingers were not laying flat on a table, they were hanging over the bar?
Yes.
Okay.
Damn,
And in fact, you
okay.
knew that when you made that opinion. Isn't that correct?
Well, I believe that as I demonstrated sitting here, that I said that he had said they were slightly curled over, I think was the description that I gave.
Your description in this courtroom was that it was laying flat, and
Yeah.
I think you've done that now twice. But in your deposition, you testified that his fingers were actually hanging over the bar. Isn't that correct?
Objection, Your Honor. Misstates the witness's testimony. He
I
clearly indicated they were
mean-
curled, or could have been curled.
Overruled.
So that's a distinction that perhaps I misstated in one of the two descriptions. However,
Okay,
that's not
dude.
substantially changed my opinion of the impact it would have on the mechanism.
Isn't it true that Mr. Depp also testified that the bottle came from an off angle?
Yes.
Okay. And you consider that in rendering your opinions today, correct?
Yes, I believe he stated that it came from between 6 and 10 feet. I think it was I think he demonstrated it was off to his right. I can't recall specifically, but it was off angle, yes.
Okay. So it didn't come from the top, as you previously testified just a few minutes ago, correct?
Well, no, it would have struck the top of the finger, but it may have been slightly off angle in its approach based on the description.
Then that's how it would get under.
Mr. Depp described it as off angle, correct?
Correct.
Then that's how it would get under. Then
Just at the outset, your billing rate for providing deposition testimony is $1,000 per hour?
That's correct.
All right. And you were deposed in this action for several hours on March 22nd, 2022?
That's correct.
And your billing rate for providing trial testimony is $5,000 per day?
That's correct.
You were retained in this case by Ms. Heard's legal team, correct?
Correct.
And over the last few years, you've provided expert services for one of Ms. Heard's law firms on at least 2 other cases, right?
That's correct, yes.
Dr. Moore, is it fair to say that you have no personal knowledge as to how Mr. Depp injured his finger in Australia, correct?
No, I have no personal knowledge. My impression is based on his description of the injury
that's
and
5 spins.
available medical records for review.
But you weren't in Australia with Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard,
I
correct?
was not in Australia, no.
And so therefore you have no personal knowledge as to how that injury was sustained.
Correct.
You also never personally examined Mr. Depp's finger, did you?
Correct.
You didn't
I'm just
examine
kidding,
Mr. Depp's
relax.
finger at the time it was injured.
I did not.
And you never provided any medical treatment to Mr. Depp in connection with his finger injury, did you?
I did not.
Now, you've testified
Wait.
that you identified Mr. Depp's finger injury as a crush injury, correct?
Correct.
And a crush injury is when a body part is
What?
crushed or trapped between 2 opposing firm surfaces, yes?
Yes.
I thought you fixed it. Then.
And a crush injury to a finger can occur when a foreign object hits the finger, right?
Yes.
And based on the pictures that you
I'm
reviewed
sorry, I'm so dumb.
of Mr. Depp's finger injury, you cannot determine what particular object caused the injury to his finger, yes?
Well, I can't determine exactly what object did it. I think that I can say with confidence that the described mechanism of the bottle hitting and shattering the finger was not consistent with the appearance
I
of the injury.
understand that.
And
My
I think
question is just very specific. You can't determine
I don't
the
think-
object that caused the injury to Mr. Depp's finger.
it's a little bit more of a non-specific answer. I mean, I can't determine the exact object, but I can determine that it's unlikely that it was sustained in the manner described.
A bottle is a foreign object, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay. So you can't rule out that the injury to Mr. Depp's finger was caused by a vodka bottle, correct?
Well, based on the injury pattern, I can say that the described mechanism of injury is inconsistent with medical findings.
Right. But because a vodka bottle is a foreign object, you can't rule out that a vodka bottle is what caused Mr. Depp's injury.
Well, I can't rule out that a vodka bottle caused the injury, but I can rule out that it was caused in the manner described in his testimony.
You can't rule out that the injury was caused by a knife, right?
I think it's unlikely that the injury was caused by a knife.
But you can't rule it out.
Well, if a simple knife laceration wouldn't impart the injury to the distal phalanx to result in the comedy fracture. Now, a chopping type, but again, that would likely come from a direction that would create a dorsal injury to create the fracture that was developed.
Do you remember giving
understand.
testimony in this case, Dr. Moore?
Deposition?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay. And you were under oath, correct?
correct.
All right. And that was on March 22nd, 2022, yes?
Correct.
Okay.
I'll explain
May I
something
get
after
one?
this.
Yes,
Very
ma'am.
important, I think.
Thank you.
So there's a problem here. The way you described it in there.
Dr. Moore, may I please have you go to page 163 of your deposition,
Say it after.
specifically
It's good,
line
it's a-
17? (163)
Uh-oh.
Actually, apologies, 164.
Paid actor better get smoked.
Line 4.
Correct.
Question, but you can't rule it out completely, right? Answer, I can't rule anything out completely. I can't rule out that he caught it in the door, cut it with a knife, or slammed it in the car door. Or, again, as Dr. Gilmer said, we can't definitively say what caused this injury. Did I read that correctly?
You did.
Your Honor, I would object as the incomplete impeachment. I think if she's going to read his answer, she also needs to read or give Dr. Moore the chance to read the paragraph below.
Impeach.
She just picked out half of his answer.
You can redirect.
Yeah,
I'll
as
overrule the
well as the
objection.
paragraph above.
Dr. Moore, there's no question pending. Thank you. So you can't rule out that the injury was caused by a car door either. Is that right?
Correct.
But it's your testimony sitting here today that you can rule out that the injury was caused by a vodka bottle. Is that your testimony?
My testimony is that I can rule out the injury as caused by the mechanism described by Mr. Depp in his deposition.
But you can't definitively say what caused the injury to Mr. Depp's finger.
Well, the definitive injury is a crush injury, again, I can't say. I mean, I think that it's quite likely that the initial mechanism described at the time of presentation of the accordion doors would classically create this injury pattern. You know, the hand up in front. If you picture accordion doors as the edge is closed, if the hand's up, the palm is exposed. If the door's pushed,
But,
and the
Dr.
hinge
Moore,
closes about the fingers.
I understand that. But my question is,
I think it's important that they understand that.
this is the time for me to ask you questions. Your counsel will have the ability to rehabilitate you and ask you questions on redirect. Right now, let's try my question.
Okay.
You can't
Holy.
definitively say what caused the injury to Mr. Depp's fingers. Yes or no?
No.
Okay.
She said.
In conducting your analysis of Mr. Depp's finger injury, you did not attempt to reconstruct the incident. Is that right?
Well, I think the incident was reconstructed. You mean did I throw a vodka bottle at something?
No, no, Dr. Moore. I mean, you didn't do any type of accident reconstruction, either computerized or you didn't conduct any type of accident reconstruction of the alleged.
No, that's correct. My opinion is based on the medical records and the clinical images and Mr. Depp's description.
I was getting involved.
And your analysis is based on an understanding of how Mr. Depp described the exact position of his finger at the time of the injury. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. And your analysis is also based on the assumption that Mr. Depp's hand remained completely still in the instance that a vodka bottle was hurled at him. Yes?
No, my assessment is on his description of the vodka bottle striking the top of his finger.
But his hand stayed still, according to your analysis. Yes?
I guess it was still long enough for the bottle to hit it, but natural reaction would be to try to pull away.
When you perform traumatic finger surgeries, you inquire about the cause of the injuries, correct?
Correct.
And your best information on that is typically just the self-report of the patient, yes?
Correct.
And your assumption is that the patient is trying to get care. Because the patient is trying to get care, that patient is generally telling the truth.
That's my
right?
point earlier.
You would hope so.
Yeah. You reviewed Dr. Kipper's deposition testimony informing your opinion about Mr. Depp's finger injury, correct?
Correct.
In forming your opinion, did you consider Dr. Kipper's deposition testimony that while Dr. Kipper was providing emergency treatment
Objection,
for
Your
Mr.
Honor.
Depp,
Can you approach?
Okay.
Damn. Hey, she's on a full combo, man. She's on a full combo. She's cooking him on the skillet. He's oiled up and bathing in grease. And they pull objection. Can we approach? Well, it's like a... They're trying to cool it down. This is a tactical pause. This is a classic. Objection is gonna go to nothing.
Let's start over, because it's important the jury hears this. So, in forming your opinion, did you consider Dr. Kipper's deposition testimony that while Dr. Kipper was providing emergency treatment for Mr. Depp's finger injury in Australia in the driveway of the house, Mr. Depp told him that his finger was injured when Miss Heard threw a vodka bottle at him?
I don't recall that from the deposition. I'd be happy to review it if you have the deposition available.
Did you consider Dr. Kipper's testimony that he recalled that Mr.
What?
Depp's finger was found in the kitchen?
I do recall that.
So you must have also seen Dr. Kipper's deposition testimony that he wasn't the one who actually found the finger, correct?
That's correct.
Dr. Kipper testified that someone he thought was the chef told him he found the finger in the kitchen area, correct?
I'm going to assume so without reading the deposition now.
Did you review any testimony from Ben King in rendering your opinions today?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Did you see any of Mr. King's testimony at this trial?
I did not.
So
$5,000
you're not
for
aware
this?
that Mr. King testified that he is the one who found Mr. Depp's finger, are you?
No.
And you're not aware that Mr. King testified that he found Mr. Depp's finger in the bar area, right?
Correct.
And you're not aware that Mr. King testified he found Mr. Depp's finger in a piece of tissue in the bar area, either.
You want subtitles off?
No.
And you're not aware that Mr. King testified that multiple broken liquor bottles were also found in the bar area, right?
Correct.
If we could please pull up Defendant's Exhibit 1817, which is already in evidence.
Holy, 5K, 10K, 20 for this? He didn't even do his homework. My man is pulling a
And
fucking
it may
on the
be
stand.
published, please.
My dog ate
I
it.
just don't have it yet.
That would help.
Yes. I just have a blank screen at the moment. There we go. Oh, start something.
Thank
There we
you.
go. Okay.
Have you ever seen this picture before, Dr. Moore?
No.
So you're not aware that this is the bar area where Mr. King testified he found Mr. Depp's finger?
No.
That would be important
Do
for
you
them.
see that broken vodka bottle in the back corner near the bottom of the bar?
Yes.
Do you see the blood drops on the floor?
Yes.
I'm taking notes.
Can we please pull up Defendant's Exhibit 1820, which is already in evidence?
If you hire a
Have
professional,
you seen this picture before, Dr. Moore?
I have not.
So you're not aware that this is also a picture from the bar area where Mr. King testified he found Mr. Depp's finger?
Correct.
Do you see the bloody tissue on the ground at the bottom of the bar?
Yes.
Do you see the blood drops around that tissue?
Yes.
So you didn't consider any of this evidence in rendering your opinion about how Mr. Depp injured his finger in Australia, did you?
I did not.
Nothing further, Your Honor. Thank you.
Jesus.
Yes, sir.
Can you pull up Exhibit 1817 that was just shown to the witness,
You
please?
would think that the defense would show any of the pictures and would equip him with all the tools that
And
he
can
needs
you
to defend himself
um,
against this.
blow up
What the fuck?
What Ms. Vasquez
What are they doing?
referred to as a broken vodka bottle. Michelle, please. Dr. Moore, what, based on your review of the documents in this case, what did you understand to be the size of the bottle of vodka that Mr. Depp alleged cut off his finger?
The description was that it was a handle, a half-gallon bottle.
And that's bigger than a 750 mil or fifth of liquor, correct?
Yes.
And what size bottle, if to the extent that's even a bottle, what size does that appear to be to you?
Calls for speculation, Your Honor.
I'll sustain the objection.
Does that appear to be a handle?
It is.
Objection calls for speculation.
I'll sustain the objection.
Yeah, stop. Is he
You
done?
take that down.
Damn.
Dr.
Holy.
Moore, Ms.
Okay.
Vasquez just asked you about Dr. Kipper's deposition testimony, and she said, is that where she claims that Mr. Depp allegedly told him that the finger was severed from a vodka bottle. Do you remember that question a few minutes ago?
Objection leading.
Overruled.
I do
Is-
remember that question.
Yes, thank you. Is that consistent, that alleged account, is that consistent with the texts you reviewed between Mr. Depp and Dr. Kipper?
No.
And what did those texts say?
As I recall, Mr. Depp indicated that he had cut his finger off.
Now, Ms. Vasquez wouldn't let you finish when you were trying to explain to the jury how Mr. Depp's account of injuring his finger in an accordion door would be perfectly consistent with the photographs you saw. Could you please explain that to the jury?
Well, so again, we tend to try to believe patients. We hope that they come in with an honest history initially, and that's a reasonable mechanism for this to have occurred. And again, if you picture your hand up with either a closure of a hinge or a closure of a door, the palmar surface is exposed. If it's caught in that hinge as it closes, it could be slightly off center. It would pinch that tissue away in a similar fashion, but because it's below the level of the nail bed, it could create this injury with the fracture, the tissue loss, and preserve the nail bed.
Okay, and then you would run to the bar and
Can you look at page
launch a finger in
164
there
of your deposition,
and
the one
then
that Ms.
lie
Vasquez just
about your
showed you?
own
Yes.
Objection,
Injury?
Your Honor. I'm going to object
Is that
on
what they're
hearsay
saying?
grounds.
Your Honor, she only...
Oh, overruled.
Thank you. Ms. Vasquez asked you a question, and then she read your answer, trying to impeach you, but she only read half of the answer. So I'm going to read the whole answer to the jury, and I'm going to ask you to tell me if I'm reading your answer right, okay? The question is on page 164, line 4, but you can't rule it out completely, right? And you answered, I can't rule anything out completely. I can't rule out that he caught it in the door, cut it with a knife, or slammed it in the car door, or again, as Dr. Gilmore said, we can't definitively say what caused this injury. And then you go on to say, this is where Ms. Vasquez cut you off and didn't let you finish.
I don't think that's in the transcript. Objection.
I'll sustain that.
The rest of your answer
cocklord.
that she didn't read to you.
What is on this guy? He's molding.
What a
baby.
The question I can answer is that the mechanism that was described by Mr. Depp and demonstrated by Mr. Depp is inconsistent with the injury pattern that's found on the images and the description. Did I read that right?
Yes.
And does that remain your opinion today?
Yes.
Has anything that's been presented to you on cross-examination changed any of the
Spochybňuj, čo chceš, len nie túto chuť. Ochutnaj novinku Mighty s extraktom z konope.
opinions that you hold in this case?
No.
I have nothing further. Thank you, Dr. Moore.
Thank you. All right, Dr. Moore, you're free to go, or you can stay in the courtroom. It's
Wow,
up to you.
got
All
him,
right,
bro.
Thank you.
What was that?
All right, your next witness,
Your Honor, we'd like to call Dr. David Spiegel.
Dr.
What?
Spiegel.
So they feed him information with some missing. Then
All right,
this
that's
guy
fine,
thinks that
sir.
somebody slams his finger into some door hinge, throws it in the bar, bleeds in there, runs out of the room. The butler picks it up. Guy goes to the hospital and makes up a complete new story to fix his own finger. If you're in the jury, dude. No, literally, don't say question mark. That is literally the way that they're trying to frame this as is. That is the most. That would be the closest potential scenario that happened from their end, right? Crushing, squeezed, pull from a door hinge. Then the finger is found at the bar across the fucking hall or across the fucking room. I don't know. Also, the guy is fed. Like, I don't get it. There's something that I don't like about this is that I get it. You're a witness and you're paid for one person. Once you're finally on the stand and you as a witness and you're giving answers, why is he so adamant not to lose? That he said some shit that doesn't really make sense. Almost like is he like the information where he says, "Oh, dude, the finger was flat." No, dude. The tip of the fingers were off the fucking off the thing, and you're like, "Oh yeah, I mean, I did say that." But dude, that's important though. Because the reason why this is so important, okay? Listen, unless tell me if I misheard or not. Okay, this is very, very important. What the fuck is this? Is this new paint? What the fuck is this garbage? Hello? Okay, is that table here like this, right? And he says that the fingers were like this, correct? Like this, right? And in his testimony, he says that it doesn't really make sense for him if it's from the dorsal top that the injury goes like this, is cutting under, right? That's kind of what he's saying, right? At the beginning, that was his testimony. That technically, you wouldn't have, if it's coming from the dorsal, an undercut on the underbelly like that. That is what he's trying to say initially, right? But then he's reminded that the fingers were said to be like this, off the table, right? Which would literally immediately explain that it could happen, based on the height of the finger, that the bottle did cut the underbelly of it, because it's not shielded by the table anymore. It's hanging completely. But he acts like, in my opinion, he acts like this is like a non-factor to the case. Like, oh yeah, I forgot that. Yeah, you're right. It was a little bit like off the table, whatever. When it is an extreme big deal to the two scenarios that he's trying to present, this one and that one, they're going to be becoming disregarded, right? That's my problem with this guy's testimony. That's my problem. Is that he makes a big deal out of the hand being face down, right? Which shields the underbelly of the finger from being cut by a bottle or whatever. And then when it was presented with this information, he kind of like dismisses it or whatever. I feel like dude. Why risk your career for this? I don't get it. Why risk your career for this? It doesn't make sense at all. Unless you're telling me that what I was saying is wrong, just tell me. Because that's because I'm a dumbass. We need to realize that most people in life are dumbasses like me. Average Joe. Okay? So which means that the jury is also probably mostly dumbasses. Like I'm a dumbass. So if that's what I understand, I would assume that's what they understand. At least on average.
Thank you. All right.
That's a problem.
Can be sworn.
You solemnly swear or affirm to testify truthfully in this case in penalty of law.
Oh, thanks, Jag. Thanks for paying attention. Oh, fuck my
Thank you,
shit.
Your Honor.
Oh my.
Will you please tell the jury your full name and business address?
David R. Spiegel. I'm a physician. I work at 825 Fairfax Avenue in Norfolk, Virginia, as part of the Eastern Virginia Medical School.
And what is your occupation?
I'm a physician psychiatrist.
And where do you work? Do you work at?
I work at Eastern Virginia. I'm employed by Eastern Virginia Medical School, but I also work at Norfolk General Hospital, which is the teaching hospital in Norfolk.
How many years have you been practicing as a psychiatrist?
I entered residency in 1989. I graduated residency in 1993. So from 1993 to today, I've been physician practicing.
So that's almost 30
That's 30
years.
years, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Please describe for the jury the nature of your clinical practice.
So my clinical practice is comprised of both inpatient care at Norfolk General Hospital, as well as my outpatient practice at Eastern Virginia Medical School. About 85 to 90% of my day is clinical between the two components.
And what is involved in a comprehensive
I'm just
evaluation?
kidding.
So in a comprehensive evaluation, in addition to reviewing the historical information that you receive from collateral other sources, you undertake a history from the patient. You get, whether it's the history of current illness, the past psychiatric history, family history, social history,
sorry.
legal, substance history. Then you do what's called a mental status exam, which is the psychiatric version of the physical exam, where you're actually giving a description of what you see in front of you. Then you can do cognitive testing, which tests the patient memory, attention, concentration, etc. Then you come up with a working and a differential diagnosis, describe any other additional testing you may need or not need, and then you come up with a treatment plan.
How many patients have you treated over the 30 years?
Quite a lot, probably in the tens of thousands.
Oh, wow.
And how many patients do you regularly see?
So inpatient is generally about 5 to 8, sometimes more. Outpatients probably 5 to 6, sometimes more. I should point out that my inpatient work is divided between consultation, psychiatry, and I believe we're going to talk about that, as well as working on the inpatient service. So I believe we will talk about that.
What, if any, differences are there on how many patients you see on weekends as opposed to weekdays?
So when I'm on call, which is on either a Saturday or a Sunday meeting, I have to be in the hospital and around. That's probably an additional 35 plus patients.
How frequently do you treat patients who abuse drugs and alcohol?
Unfortunately, drugs and alcohol are part of psychiatric practice. And so probably 3/4 of my patients have substance abuse problems.
Does this include both legal and illegal drugs?
Yes. Put them both together, probably 75%.
And how frequently do you treat patients who have suffered from someone in their lives who abuses alcohol and drugs?
On a regular basis, like I said, on a daily basis. This is part of what psychiatry is.
Okay. And as part of that treatment of patients who abuse drugs and alcohol, do you evaluate the impact of the abuse on their brains and personal interactions with others?
Yes, substance of abuse, both in the short term and the long term, can affect the brain in terms of mood, behavior, cognition, meaning attention, concentration, memory, ability to control your behavior, as well as your overall level of functioning. It can affect it in the short term, such as alcoholic blackouts. It can affect it by causing stroke, such as stimulants can. And so at the end of the day, it's a rather lengthy list of what substance abuse can do to the human brain.
Dr. Spiegel, how frequently have you treated patients who have suffered intimate partner violence?
Again, it's very unfortunate that probably 50% of my patients suffer from trauma. If I had to guess of those 50%, probably 25% of my practice is people who have suffered intimate partner violence.
And how consistent is that with the national average?
In America, unfortunately, it's about 20 to 25%, depending on the study of women have complained, have reported intimate partner violence.
And how frequently have you treated patients who have perpetrated the intimate partner violence?
So again, in the outpatient setting, I don't see it quite as much, but in the inpatient setting, again, it's a really relative common phenomenon that we'll see perpetrators of partner violence, and they're patients who need treatment too.
And overall, how many patients have you treated who have been perpetrators of intimate partner violence?
Perpetrators?
Yes.
Probably 5 to 10% of the patients I do is perpetrators.
And would you say tens of thousands over the 30 years?
Yes.
And leading.
Overruled. Thank you. As part of treating patients relating to intimate partner violence, do you regularly evaluate these patients?
Do I regularly evaluate the patient?
Evaluate the patient, yes.
Oh, yes. Yes, regularly. I mean, they get the same comprehensive evaluation that I described before.
Are you licensed in Virginia?
Yes, I am.
And when did you first become licensed in Virginia?
1993.
Have you been qualified by courts as an expert witness?
Yes, I have.
In how many states have you been qualified as an expert?
3, which would be Virginia, Maryland, and South Carolina.
Dr. Spiegel, can you please review for the jury your educational background, beginning with your undergraduate studies?
So I went to Duke University undergrad. I went to medical school at the State University of New York Health Science Center in Brooklyn, formerly known as Downstate Medical Center. I did my internship and residency between Dartmouth Hitchcock Medical Center and Penn State Hershey Medical Center.
No more, I'm done.
And-
It's just jokes.
And I'm also fellowship board certified in consultation liaison psychiatry.
Okay. And where did you do your residency and your internships?
So I did my residency for Penn State and internship at Dartmouth.
Okay. And what is your current title and position?
So I am the acting chair, endowed chair, and professor in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences at Eastern Virginia Medical School.
Are you board certified?
Yes, I am.
And what are you board certified in?
General adult psychiatry and consultation liaison psychiatry is a subspecialty.
Okay. So you have 2 board certifications.
Yes.
Okay. Can you explain to the jury what's involved in board certifications in those 2 fields?
So board certification is the standard we strive to in being a physician or any other mental health practitioner. It involves taking a very comprehensive test at the beginning of your career to initiate board certification. Then you get tested again every 10 years. Then you have to go through continual medical education throughout the entire period. You have to do what's called performance in practice, which is basically ways to improve things in your practice. And again, this occurs always throughout the years.
Okay. Now, are you a member of any professional organizations?
Yes, I am.
Could you
I'm a
please tell the
member
jury?
of the American Psychiatric Association, as well as the fellow of the American Psychiatric Association. I'm a member of the Medical Society of Virginia. I'm a member of the Psychiatric Society of Virginia. I'm a member of the Tidewater Academy of Psychiatry, and I'm a member of the Academy of Consultation Liaison Psychiatry.
Do you have any teaching responsibilities?
Teaching? Oh, yeah.
Teaching, yes.
So, yes. So, teaching is a daily occurrence as part of my job when I do my inpatient rounds. Residents, medical students, physician assistant students are assigned. So we round together, and there's teaching with every single encounter. In addition to that, I teach lectures to the residents, to the 3rd, 2nd, and 1st year medical students, as well as a 4th year medical student lecture as well. So I'm constantly teaching.
Have you engaged in any hands-on training of psychiatrists practicing in Virginia?
Hands-on training with the residents?
With psychiatrists?
Oh, yeah. So, again, I'm teaching at bedside. I mean, we don't speak in front of the patient, obviously, but I'm teaching at bedside, meaning after we see a patient, we discuss the important points to learn. And, again, that includes residents at every level. That includes medical students, 3rd, 2nd, and 1st year physician assistant students. So every day is a teaching explanation session to the students and residents.
What is your role at Eastern Virginia Medical School as the acting chair? Please tell the jury what that means.
So as the acting chair, you are not only accountable for your own practice, but you are accountable for your faculty members' practices. So I have to make sure that everyone is treating, seeing, evaluating a certain number of patients. I have responsible for their academic requirements, so in terms of publishing, et cetera. I'm responsible for their teaching assignments to other residents, to other students. I'm responsible for fiscally, that they are accountable to their fiscal productivity. So, and a heck of a lot of other administrative meetings that I go to.
Have you published in your field?
To the tune of about 80 manuscripts, and I have my own book on catatonia and the consultation liaison setting. I have a book chapter on the current and current and contemporary approaches temporomandibular disease, at least the psychiatric portion. I'm also in a dissociative identity disorders chapter on a wiki book.
And have you peer-reviewed literature?
Yes, so
we get it. He's qualified. Holy shit!
I've served as a reviewer
My God.
on Lancet. I've served as a reviewer as
they're making him qualified. We get it. Like at some point, it gets kind of annoying.
I've served on reviewer for clinical neuropharmacology, and I'm actually editor-in-chief of, at this point.
I'm not mad. This always gets kind of annoying.
Have you lectured on the effects of drugs and alcohol on the human brain?
Yes, I teach to the residents. I teach lecture to the second-year medical students, third-year medical students. So I am fully aware of not only what I teach, but what I see in the emergency room and the consultation and inpatient settings.
Have you published and lectured on the causes and effects of intimate partner abuse?
Yes, I punctured, I believe, 2 articles on the effects of trauma, and in that trauma was intimate partner violence.
Are you familiar with the hallmarks of intimate partner violence?
Yes.
Are you familiar with what causes intimate partner violence?
One more, excuse me?
What causes intimate partner violence?
Yes, there's a multiple explanation that cause intimate partner violence. And if I can just mention at this point too, that when we are discussing intimate partner violence, I think it's imperative for the jury to know we are talking about repetitive behavior over periods of time. And the type of abuse can be any physical, psychological, sexual, but just as important is for somebody, one of the partners, to maintain some uneven element of control or to maintain power, control, or authority. So there are a lot of facets to intimate partner violence. I know people tend to think of it as just the actual abuse act, but there's more to it than just the actual abuse act. Abuse act's important, but it's not the sole thing.
Okay.
Your Honor, I move to qualify Dr. Spiegel as an expert in the field of psychiatry and behavioral sciences with specific emphasis on drug and alcohol abuse, intimate partner violence, and the effect of these as they pertain to the issues in this case.
All right, any objection?
Yes, Your Honor.
You wish to voir dire?
I do.
Okay. To his qualifications.
His qualification.
Okay, thank you.
Wait, they object to his qualifications.
Sir, you talked about 2 board certifications, general adult psychiatry.
Yes.
And liaison consultation psychiatry.
Other way around, but consultation liaison
psychiatry.
Subtle point.
Right. Now, that is not intimate partner violence. That deals with a issue of comorbidity between people who have medical problems and health problems.
So you're saying it's subspecialty?
Yes.
So consultation liaison psychiatry does have that, but you're also treating patients who have medical illness who have comorbid psychiatric illness, or people who have psychiatric illness that have comorbid medical illness. And many of the patients that I see on the trauma service have tried to take their own life, and unfortunately, as part of that, intimate partner violence and trauma in general is part and parcel of that. So it's very, very narrow to say it's just the medical psychiatric interface. It's much more of psychiatric patients who need medical help, medical patients who develop psychiatric problems, but also that interface.
So as a subset of your trauma patients, which you say are about 50% of your practice, as a subset of that practice, some people have been involved with intimate partner violence.
So as a subset of my overall practice, 50% have suffered from trauma, about half of that number have suffered from, I'm sorry, about 20, so it's about 20% that suffer from intimate partner violence.
All right. You've never conducted any empirical research on individuals who experienced intimate partner violence, have you, sir?
If your definition is trials, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Like pharmaceutical trials, or what are you saying? Is that what you're saying? Because I've done review articles on patients who suffered from trauma. So the answer is, oh, I haven't done any studies like where you give them medication for treatment or try one treatment versus another.
What?
I've reviewed the
What's
body
happening?
of literature on intimate partner violence to get 2 review articles, yes.
So you've read about it, is what you just testified to.
I would have to disagree with you on that, sir. Reading about it and writing a review article are completely 2 different things, sir.
All right. You haven't authored any articles specifically on IPV, have you, sir?
As a subset of trauma, the answer is yes. In terms of in the name of the title of the article, the answer is no.
You've never written any books specifically on IPV?
I've never written any books on IPV, although temporomandibular disease, okay, in terms of psychiatric issues, does have a higher frequency in those patients who have suffered from trauma, including intimate partner violence.
You've never...
And I am part of that book.
Okay. Temporal mandibular disease deals with problems with the jaw?
Is that a question, sir?
What is temporomandibular?
Temporomandibular disease is a problem with oral issues, yeah, but there are many patients who complain of oral issues where the oral surgeon cannot find a reason for it, and the reason why they can't is because people who have suffered from trauma and intimate partner violence are prone to increased sensitivity of somatic sensations, which can manifest in temporomandibular disease. Thank you, I appreciate that. Nice plug for my book, too, thank you.
Didn't hear it, but there we go. So, you haven't written any chapters of any books.
What the fuck is that?
Specifically about IPV.
Again, I think I've gone over that. I've written 2 articles on that, and I've written parts of chapters. And dissociative identity disorder, I should add, where I did write a chapter on, is completely based on trauma and intimate partner violence.
Right. I'm not asking you about trauma because you want to talk about trauma. I'm asking you about IPV specifically.
I will reiterate again, you cannot separate intimate partner violence and say that is a separate rubric aside from trauma. Trauma is overall, intimate partner violence is part of trauma, and the answer to the question is any individual who suffers from a dissociative
It's an umbrella
disorder, which
term.
I am the author of a chapter of, suffers from trauma, whether it be at the hands in childhood or it be at the hands
It's an
of the
umbrella.
intimate partner.
Right.
Trauma.
You've already testified that
IPV.
half your practice is trauma and a subset of that practice is IPV, correct?
Which is, actually, I treat the national average of patients. About 20% of patients suffer from it, and that's about my practice number.
Except you're discounting the fact that half your practice is not trauma at all. So 10% of your practice is IPV.
I don't know if the numbers add up exactly like that.
I'm just using
but
yours.
I don't know if I'm doing, I don't know if those numbers add up like that, because
Well,
I'm not sure if that's
50
the case. If you
and
say
20,
25%,
I
then
mean-
maybe 12.5% of my practice. That's being rather specific. So again, a significant number of my patients have suffered from intimate partner violence. I see it on a daily basis, and I'm not sure exactly why I'm getting asked the same question again.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
You listed 60 references to articles. I guess you said 80 now, and publications. And
I said around 80. I said around 80.
60, 80, whatever it is, right?
No, 60 and 80 is not. If you go to the PubMed, actually, you go to PubMed right now and Google, not Google.
Oh,
PubMed,
no, this guy.
Google DR, and you'll find that number is 72 with 2 waiting to be impressed.
no.
1 submitted, so that'd be 75. So it's at around 80. So again, what's on my CV is not necessarily the most updated version, because I still publish since the CV's been.
Who inquired about
given
this?
to you, sir.
Right. And